might beat the other church to dinner tonight. What you think? Who remembers where we were this morning? Mark? That's it. Turn the page. You don't even turn the page. We're going to stay right there. What were we kidding about where Mark was? You all remember? Right after Matthew. And right after chapter 7, since we were in chapter 8 this morning. How many of you, and I'm admitting that I have, took me a long time to admit it, and I was talking to somebody special in my life when I realized that they do it too, or they have been guilty of it. And you don't need to raise your hands. But I still want to ask the question, how many of us have ever asked ourselves if we're really saved? Have we really made sure that we're sure that we're sure? You know, sometimes, and I admitted this today at lunch, as long as it went on, that sometimes I'm sad when I go to bed. And just as I'm kind of putting my thoughts together for what happened during the day, I realize just how important I was to Jesus, that he would give his own life, and just how unworthy I have felt in showing him that back. And sometimes it's led me to the question of whether or not, and then of course, it's revealed in my heart again that yes, I am. I just need to be better about being thankful. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I preached a message a couple weeks ago, and the message was actually based on whether or not it's okay to ask God questions. And of course, it is okay to ask God questions. In fact, I'm not sure that it would be okay not to ask God questions. It changes when you go from asking a question into making when you're, the word just went right out of my brain. When you accuse, when you make an accusation, there's a real big difference between asking a question and making an accusation. And so sometimes we do that. Well, what was on my mind most of the day and some of yesterday and the day before that and the day before that and probably the day before that was the fact that I need help with my unbelief. And you say, whoa, your unbelief. We're going to look through this, and we're going to show that unbelief doesn't have to be this foundational thing in your life. I'm not saying that you don't have belief in God. But just like Peter this morning, we saw had a moment of lapse where he rebuked Jesus. And Jesus turned and said, "Get behind me, Satan." Did you notice that Jesus was firm but loving in that? He didn't tell Peter to go away. It was his way, the traditional way, by saying, "Get behind me," that was saying, "You're in timeout. Get behind me, Satan." And Jesus was saying, "I know where that's coming from. I know exactly where that's coming from." And then he actually goes on to readdress He says, "For thou savorest not the things that be of God, but the things that be of men." Was he talking to Peter? Absolutely. But was he talking to Peter? No. He was actually talking to that moment of lapse that Peter had that had come from Satan. So we do this from time to time, and we're going to look at verses 1 through 27, and I would like to, if I could, if you'll bear with me, I would like to read actually 2 through 27. Anybody know why I want to leave out verse 1 of chapter 9? Verse 1 of chapter 9, in my understanding in the context of the word, probably belongs at the end of chapter 8. Even though we all love our King James, sometimes we can find where maybe they could have done a different job in splitting up verses. And I think this might be one of those examples. But starting in verse 2 of chapter 9, "And after 6 days Jesus taketh with him Peter and James and John, and leadeth them up into an high mountain apart by themselves, and he was transfigured before them. And his raiment became shining, exceeding white as snow, so as no fuller on earth can white them. And there appeared unto them Elias and Moses, and they were talking with Jesus. And Peter answered and said unto Jesus, Master, it is good for us to be here. And let us make 3 tabernacles, one for thee, and one for Moses, and one for Elias. For he wist not what to say, for they were sore afraid. And there was a cloud that overshadowed them, and a voice came out of the cloud saying, This is my beloved Son, hear him. And suddenly when they had looked around about, they saw no man any more, save Jesus only with themselves. And as they came down from the mountain, he charged them that they should tell no man what things they had seen, till the Son of Man were risen from the dead. And they kept that saying with themselves, questioning one with another what the rising from the dead should mean. Let's stop there just for a second. Do you see how that now ties in with Peter's rebuke of Jesus earlier in chapter 8? Peter had rebuked Jesus because he said that he was going to die. Jesus said, I'm going to be put to death. And Peter said, no, that's not the way I got it. And then Jesus rebuked him back. Well, see, here now they're talking to themselves. What is this risen from the dead thing? What is he talking about? So see, they didn't have full understanding, and that's why Jesus rebuked him in the way that he did. He was still being gentle. And they asked him, saying, Why say the scribes that Elias must first come? And he answered and told them, Elias verily cometh first, and restoreth all things, and how it is written of the Son of Man that he must suffer many things, and be set at naught. But I say unto you that Elias is indeed come, and they have done unto him whatsoever they listed, as it is written of him. And when he had come to his disciples, he saw a great multitude about them, and the scribes questioning with them. And straightway all the people, when they beheld him, were greatly amazed, and running to him, saluted him. And he asked the scribes, What question ye with them? And one of the multitude answered and said, Master, I have brought unto thee my son, which hath a dumb spirit. And wheresoever he taketh him, he teareth him, and he foameth and gnasheth with his teeth, and pinneth away. And I spake to thy disciples that they should cast him out, and they could not. He answereth them and saith, O faithless generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer you? Bring him unto me. And they brought him unto him, and when he saw him, straightway the spirit tare him, and he fell on the ground and wallowed foaming. And he asked his father, How long is it ago since this came unto him? And he said, Of a child. And oftentimes it hath cast him into the fire and into the waters to destroy him. But if thou canst do anything, have compassion on us and help us. Jesus said unto him, If thou canst believe, all things are possible to him that believeth. And straightway the father and the child cried out, and said with tears, Lord, I believe. Help thou mine unbelief. When Jesus saw that the people came running together, he rebuked the foul spirit, saying unto him, Thou dumb and deaf spirit, I charge thee, come out of him, and enter no more into him. Excuse me. And the spirit cried, and rent him sore, and came out of him, and he was as one dead, insomuch that many said, He is dead. But Jesus took him by the hand, and lifted him up, and he arose. And when he was come into the house, his disciples asked him privately, Why could not we cast him out? And he said unto them, This kind can come forth by nothing but by prayer and fasting. So read a lot there, and obviously we could take verses 2 through 13 and make about 3 different hour-long messages. We could talk about the transfiguration. We could talk about Elijah coming forth. We could probably talk about whether or not you believe that's John the Baptist reincarnate, or Elijah as John the Baptist reincarnate. We could talk about a couple of things. But what I really want you to notice here from 2 through 13 is where they were. They were on a mountain. On my trip to Israel, we started the first few days in Jordan. I believe it was the first day we were there, and maybe probably the second. We ended up in the area that most believe was the spot, or real close, where Moses was given the opportunity to look into the promised land. Pretty emotional, right? When you think about it. This is probably because obviously from our depiction that we're given, the physical attributes of the terrain were right there. There's not too many other places he could have been. So it was probably right there. And I'll be honest with you, it was like a kick in the chest by a donkey in a good way when the sun began to set and the rays from the sun shone down on Jerusalem. Of course, I didn't know that yet because it was so far away. But the scenery was magnificent. And I tried to just take myself back and think, wow, how amazing was it the day that Moses was allowed to look out. Skip forward a few days. I'm now standing in the valley, or at Megiddo. I'm standing on the hill of Megiddo, and I'm looking into the valley, which is 25 miles wide, because just on the other side of the valley is Jerusalem. Now, I had done the hydraulic calculations on how much blood it was going to take to fill that valley to the horse's bridle. I can tell you I was way off, because it was breathtaking to see just how big that valley is, the future Armageddon. But that's when our guide asked us to turn around 180 degrees and look in the opposite direction. And he says, you see the mountain. It's not a hill, and it's not a mountain, but it's just big enough, it's kind of rounded off at the top. You see that? And of course, all of us were, yeah, we see that. That is the Mount of Transfiguration. And that's when it hit me. Just 3 days ago, I was where Moses was standing, somewhere, when God told him that he wasn't going to be allowed into the promised land. Now here I am on the other side, realizing that Elijah and Moses were on the hill with Jesus during his transfiguration. They say that when you read your Bible, it's in black and white until you've gone to Israel. Then your Bible becomes colorful. It is no lie. But these three men had gone with Jesus to a mountain. It says here that Peter didn't want to leave. He was happy right where he was at. Anybody ever been on vacation and didn't want to go home? It was very hard for me the first 2 weeks I was back in the States. I did not want to leave Israel. There's just something about it. I wanted to stay there and go help them dig. So I didn't want to leave. But when I did, the moment I got home, there was some reality. There were things that I needed to take care of in my life. And Jesus said, we must go back down because what he's really said, we've got things to take care of. We've got some things to do. So we've got to come off this mountain and get back to work. And so immediately they're met with difficulty. They're met with this man and his son. So there was no more time to rest in the beauty of the moment that they were just in, but now they've got to get back to work. And as much as we really enjoy those mountaintop experiences, we've got to get back into the valleys where things still need to be taken care of. And that's really kind of what how this lesson gets kicked off. As we examine the aspects of this encounter, I want you to please consider this thought within yourself. Lord, help my unbelief. Okay? Unbelief does not have to be a stout, foot-in-the-ground stance against God. Unbelief can show up as even the smallest moments of confusion or lapses in judgment because we haven't considered inviting Jesus into every aspect of our life. I heard you this morning, finishing up, as you were wrapping up Sunday school, say something to the effect of, without Jesus in our lives, we can't get anything. We're not going to accomplish much. And then you followed that up with the fact that when we don't include Jesus, we're going to fail. We've got to keep him. We have to stay engaged with him so that we're doing what he wants. And I'm obviously paraphrasing. But it was a good point. We've got to do that. So let's go ahead and examine our text. And our focus today is going to be verses 14 through 29. And I want to discuss 5 thoughts about unbelief. And the first one is the difficulty encountered. After the experience of the transfiguration, the disciples were immediately met with a difficult situation regarding a man and his son. It says in verses 17 and 18, and one of the multitude answered and said, Master, I have brought unto thee my son, which hath a dumb spirit, and whosoever he taketh him, he teareth him, and he foameth and gnasheth with his teeth, and pinneth away. So this word taketh is the idea of laying hold, grabbing, seizing. The word teareth is like having convulsions. And the word pinneth is unlike what I did at lunch. I ate plenty, and I was not withering away. But that's what pinneth would be. So he's given this condition, and this condition is coming from three different things. This young man was dominated, he was delusional with despair, he was defeated. In verse 18 it says, and wheresoever he taketh him, he teareth him. That's being dominated. He is being controlled. This young man cannot do anything without this demon inside him controlling him. And it's tearing him apart. But he's also delusional with despair. We see that he's foaming and he's gnashing his teeth. When the evil spirit would attack this young man, he would cry out, screaming, I'm sure, in pain and misery. He's foaming at the mouth. And his life was not being lived in a normal, peaceful way. So if you've ever been in a lot of pain for any period of time, and I'm not talking about 8 hours. I'm talking about over time. We were talking about today. No, I'm not going to go there. But if you've been in pain over time, it can bring on despair, misery, anxiety, all kinds of bad juju. Okay? So that's where this young man is. He is delusional with despair, but he's also defeated. In these verses, it says, I spake to thy disciples that they should cast him out, and they could not. And he asked his father, Jesus did, how long is it ago since he came into him? He says, he was a child when this began. But now he's a young man. So this has been going on for a while. Now, why would he describe in the fire and then back in the water? Why would that be a dangerous thing? Would you ever pour water directly on your chimney after it's been nice and hot for days and days and days? Would you spray it with water? Why? It spalls. It cracks. That sudden burst of cold after you've had the hot cracks cement immediately. As a fireman, we were always told if you have a structure fire where there is a brick chimney, we always do our best not to directly strike the chimney with a straight stream of water because it will spall. If that spalls, it falls. That's how firemen have to think. We have to make rhymes out of things. Otherwise, we don't remember anything. We have to use acronyms. If it spalls, it falls. And it's true. I've seen them tumble. So this is a description of something that they knew way before fire trucks were ever designed. But this young man dealt with Satan's influence and his domination on a daily basis. And now we've got a very defeated young man. And it appears hopeless for him. On June 15th, 1815, Napoleon came against England in the Battle of Waterloo. Reports came back from the front lines, and the message before the fog rolled in, Wellington defeated. Later that day, their sorrow of defeat was transformed into the joy of victory when then they were able to read the rest of the message Wellington defeated the enemy. Just the same from the cross, the message, Christ defeated. But just 3 days later, that message said Christ defeated death. So even in our despair, if we'll show some faith, if we'll stay out of unbelief, God might send you some paper. What you think? You think Chaim didn't feel despair, unbelief, while he was in prison for almost 20 years? And yet God found a way to bring him the message. And the message was, I still love you. Good things are going to come. Just hold on. Just hold on. We've got a plan. This young man was literally living in torment, but his story doesn't end there. We have this compassion of the Father also in these verses. The desire of this Father comes in verse 17. It says, one of the multitude answered and says, Master, I brought thee my son. He's looking for help. And then he reveals too that he came to the disciples first and they were unable to help. And he says, Lord, Master, please, if you can do anything, please help. Please, I'm begging you. So we've got this real desire from this Father to see his son healed. And listen, as a father, I would want my children healed if they were in despair. See, we have a dilemma here, even with the Father. And we see that in verse 18, 22, and 24, where there's this realization that the disciples were unable to cast this demon out. And Jesus starts to really focus in on the Father. And he says, how long has this been going on? The Father says, well, since he was a child. And then in verse 23, he says, if thou canst believe, all things are possible to him that believe. If you just show some belief, some faith, this thing could be done. Now, I find it interesting. It says here, and straightway the father of the child cried out and said with tears, just like we were talking about with the song this morning, it's great to hear a good song. It's better to see one acting it out as they're singing it because they love it, they believe it. We saw that this morning. This man is crying out in tears, I believe. Help thou mine unbelief. Where did this man start the healing process for his son? Just then. In who? I understand. Okay, let me rephrase the question. The faith was shown by the Father, and who did the Father ask Jesus to heal first? Through, himself. I mean, it's clear. It's right there. And straightway the father of the child cried out and said with tears, Lord, I believe, help thou mine unbelief. Jesus had just said, if you'll believe, things will happen. And the man starts crying out and says, then help my unbelief. I believe. Help me please make me to be the person you want me to be. We've got to do that a little bit more, don't we? I need to do that a lot more. So there's this dilemma. But it sounds like we've kind of got this figured out, don't we? Well, the man does. The second thought of unbelief is the desperation that's exposed. Mark revealed this was a desperate situation. Others had compassion for the situation, but they were unable to help. Their desperation is revealed in their lack of faith and their lack of fortitude. verse 18, and I spake to thy disciples that they should cast him out. But we find out they couldn't. And Jesus, what does he say? O faithless generation, how long shall I be with you? These lacked the faith necessary to overcome Satan and gave them the victory. Now, why would Jesus make such a statement to men, to humans? He says, O faithful generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer you? And then almost sarcastically, he says, bring him to me. I'm going to show you something here. In Mark chapter 3, verse 13, and he goeth on a mountain, called him who he would, and they came unto him, and he ordained 12 that they should be with him, and that he might send them forth to preach, and to have power to heal sickness, and to cast out devils. Now skip forward. This man has come to the disciples. They haven't got a clue what to do. And Jesus is saying, how long do I have to be here and tell you that I have given you these things? They're not working because you don't have any faith. But just a minute ago, we also proved that you didn't have the understanding. And Jesus isn't being ugly. He's making a point. I can teach you all these things, but if you won't apply them, they're worthless. We can be taught every Sunday and Wednesday the application of what Jesus is telling us to do. But if we're not going to go out and use those things in faith so that others can hear the good news of the coming kingdom, what good is it? If we don't take the time to learn and understand the things that Jesus is saying, then how are we ever going to have faith to be able to do those things? We have to get in the Word. We pray, we read. That's the biggest way that we communicate with God. God is going to give most of our answers through His Word. How many times have you opened the Bible after a prayer 3 or 4 weeks ago, opened the Bible and said, okay, I gotcha. I see it now. Well, you must not have been ready at the moment. God is only going to give you what you're ready for. But he shows a little bit of frustration with Peter, James, and says, how long must I be with you to show you how to help others? You've been with me the whole time. So there's this lack of fortitude. The third thing that I'd like to discuss about this is the devastation experienced. We've seen the difficulty exposed. We've seen the desperation exposed. And now let's look at the devastation experienced. Verse 20. And they brought him unto him, and when he saw him, straightway the spirit tare him. You think the spirit wanted out? No. He was going to hold on for everything he was worth. He tare him, and he fell on the ground and wallowed, foaming. I can only imagine the convulsions. We would probably just surpass all the other convulsion names that we have out there. I think this is way past Grand Mal. This cat was kicking and moving because there was a demon trying to stay inside. So he falls on the ground foaming. Here we discover the devastation this young man experienced as he was attacked by the evil spirits is horrifying, first of all, but there is a timing of this attack. As they brought the young man to Jesus, the enemy attacked. He did not want him to get to Jesus. In other words, the demon didn't want this young man getting to Jesus because he knew what the end result would be. This was no accident. In fact, it was carefully orchestrated. He attacked when the young man was vulnerable, and he had made the decision to come to Jesus and was about to have the opportunity for healing. Satan wanted to keep him away from the Lord. Have you ever asked yourself, or said to yourself, that's just my luck? Something goes wrong? Well, that's just my luck. If I didn't have bad luck, I wouldn't have any luck at all. I don't believe in luck. You're either blessed or you're not. I don't believe in the luck thing. You're either blessed or you're not. Satan hasn't changed his ways. He still hates us. I feel like I drove that point home this morning. He hates you. Period. I'm not going to beat that one again. Expect his attack. Can I tell you who Satan does? Can I tell you the Christians Satan doesn't attack? The Eastmissers. Those that show up on Easter and Christmas. He's not going to attack Eastmissers. Well, everybody should get dressed up on Easter. We've got to go get our annual dresses and our shoes, get our nice suit and tie. That's what we do. Aren't we supposed to go out drinking after that? Satan could care less about folks that show up every now and then. He's going to attack those who are serious about being workmen for God. Those are the people he's going to attack. He could care less about those who show up when the moon is right. There was this tenacity in this attack too. This young man was being ripped apart by this demon so to prevent himself from being pulled away and dealt with by Jesus. And I also think that the closer that we get to Jesus, the more the attacks, the more tenacious the attacks are going to be. Now, what does it have to do with our unbelief? Everything. Everything. That's when we're vulnerable. Peter was a man of God. Trust me. But he had a moment of vulnerability, and Satan used it. Satan is not going to show up in a puff of smoke or fire with explosions going all around him. He's not going to show up in a big red suit with a pitchfork and announce who he is. Satan's going to show up in our lives subtly so that he can work his way in and place that doubt wherever he can. That's what he wants to do. Why? Again, because he hates you. That's where our unbelief comes from. So get rid of him. Pray that God would help you be protected from these attacks. So we've seen the difficulty exposed. We've seen the desperation exposed. We've seen the devastation experienced. And now we're going to look at the deliverance extended. Verses 25 through 29. And just real quick, if I may. When Jesus saw that the people came running together, he rebuked the foul spirit, saying unto him, Thou dumb and deaf spirit, I charge thee, come out of him, and enter no more into him. And the spirit cried and rent him sore, and came out of him, and he was as one dead, insomuch that many said, He is dead. But Jesus took him by the hand, lifted him up, and he arose. And when he was come into the house, his disciples asked him privately, Why could not we cast him out? And he said unto them, This kind can come forth by nothing but by prayer and fasting. You realize fasting doesn't necessarily mean starving yourself to death, right? Okay, all right. I could use a week of fasting. That would be great. And I'm not being facetious about fasting. There is a time for fasting in our lives, and it's serious. It's a serious thing. But here we have this rebuke, and we saw that in verse 25, and it speaks of declaring guilt to this demon. You're guilty of doing these things, and Jesus has the ability to call out the spirit and pronounce judgment. And restrain it from further hindrance, not only from this young man, but from us today, currently in this world. Jesus, right here, revealed his absolute authority. Then there's this restoration in verses 26 and 27. And the spirit cried and rent him sore. He was holding on. He was holding on. But there was some faith going on as well. Remember Dad? He was faithful in this. Anybody ever watch the Olympic rowing team? You've got, 8 or 12 people inside the I don't want to say it wrong. It looks like a gigantic canoe, but I know it's not a canoe. I know there's a word, better word than that. But you've got these people that are rowing, and they're rowing their hearts out. But are they facing the finish line? No, they're not. But you've got one person at the end of the canoe, and he's facing the finish line. And he's calling out, or she is calling out, the cadence. I'd kind of get mad at him. If once I got tired, I was like, row yourself, buddy. But that's all part of it. You see, right now I'm rowing. I want to get to the finish line. Maybe that's tonight. Maybe that's tomorrow. Maybe that's 10 years from now. I don't know when it is. But I'm going to keep my eyes focused on the one calling the cadence. And I'm going to keep rowing. Because I'm going to have faith. Am I going to get tired? Yeah. What am I going to want to miss a row or two so I can rest my weary arms? Probably. But I'm going to keep my eyes on the one calling the cadence. And that's this restoration that we're talking about. Stay on it. The rebuke and restoration Jesus gave this young man is a beautiful picture of our salvation. We're healed from the disease of sin. We're set free from Satan's bondage. We're delivered from the guilt and shame of our past, and we're restored to God through the Son. Jesus alone has the ability to restore a sinful, sick soul. The last idea that I'd like to talk to you about talking about unbelief is the revelation. And that's this discussion in verses 28 and 29 that Jesus has with his disciples. And they're inside the privacy of a home when the disciples question the Lord regarding their inability to cast out this spirit. And Jesus revealed that these could only be defeated through prayer and fasting. There had to be a great faith and a great preparation through the Lord to overcome this. A casual approach was never going to be sufficient for this task at hand, which ties into the comment that I just made about Eastmissers. You think that people that show up 2 or 3 times a year are really going to have a grasp, a good idea of the ministries that are taking place in the church currently? You ever been irritated by someone who showed up 3/4 of the way through the movie and asked how it got there? If you were really interested when I said I'm going to go watch a movie, you would have come with me from the beginning. The other thing is, you have that same group of folks. Let me paint this picture real quick. Say you have a man, and I don't know if I've described this to anybody before. Let's say you have, I don't know, that'd be a man. Let's say you have someone who is 50 yards from a barn, a big barn, and they've got a bow and arrow in their hand. Good one, a good compound bow. And on the side of that barn, they have painted a gigantic target. And so the man pulls back that bow. He looses that arrow, but doesn't even hit the target. And I'm not talking about the outside ring or the bullseye. I mean, he missed the target completely. Ding! Well, about the time that he gets ready to string another arrow and pull back, somebody else comes by. And he pulls and gets ready, looses that sucker, and it misses the target again. Now you got this other fella. I don't think you're doing it right. He says, watch this. Gets another one. Misses that arrow, misses the target completely. And he says, man, I'm fixing to have to show you how that's done. He says, no. He says, I'll get it, you watch. Pulls back, shoots another one, misses it again, completely. The guy says, you know what? You're no good at this. I don't even know I'm wasting my time with you. You don't even know what you're doing. He says, what are you talking about? He said, you didn't hit the target one time. He said, nope. But all 5 of those arrows are right on top of each other. You see, when a church does ministry, it doesn't have to be what everybody else is shooting for. It needs to be what you're good at. And obviously, the guy shooting these arrows was hitting the same spot every single time. That's what he's good at. Now, how does this other guy tie in? He's that casual believer that shows up and says, you don't know what you're doing. I don't even know why I come. It's our job as believers in our testimony, our walk daily, to help those who are casual to understand why that is wrong or why that doesn't help them at all. Jesus didn't casually carry his cross outside the city gates to be casually nailed to a cross, to be casually strung up in front of everybody to be seen, bloodied, beaten, like no man has ever been bloodied or beaten before, so that he could casually die for you and I. The casual churchgoers are the ones that have the most unbelief. And you can get mad with me if you want to. You can. I don't care. I'm fixing to leave. I don't have to come back. I got my jelly. I got my belly full. And I got plenty of gas. I can just get in the car and go. So you can get mad at me if you want to. You think every church across America doesn't have the same kind of problem with their casual attendance? It comes from unbelief. Oh, once today was good. I think I was here the last time I asked the question mathematically, how many hours a week do we put into giving our time back to God? Sunday morning, let's even do this. Sunday school, that's an hour. Sunday morning, it's an hour. Sunday night, good to see you. Wednesday afternoon, or Wednesday night, 4 hours in a week. How many hours are there in a week? 24. What you doing them other 20 hours? I'm sorry, 24 in a day. I'm sorry. It might be time to go home. $24 times 7. You get what I'm saying. How many hours have we been casual? I don't know. We all face difficulties in life, and one of those difficulties are beyond our ability to handle. We need to be sure that we understand that if it's hard to handle, it's probably because we haven't invited Jesus into that situation. And you know, we do that through complacency. Well, I know he just helped me through that big thing. I got this. No. Jesus didn't say, come to me for all your big problems. He said, bring it all to me. My shoulders are big enough, I can take it. I'm paraphrasing. Are you struggling in the valley of life? Does it seem as if your faith is weak at times? The Lord has the ability to meet our needs and increase our faith. We must trust him to provide, and even when it appears hopeless, we must remain faithful. Maybe you've had time like this young man in need of spiritual deliverance. Jesus provided the means of salvation, and we must come to him in repentance and faith. If you're still unsaved, let's fix that tonight. What do you think? Otherwise, I'm going to come down here, we're going to have a word of prayer and be dismissed. How about that?